Hey cats, it's Ed Zoom X Bud here. I was one of the first people to review the Nike ALPHAFLY when it first released back in 2020. Now we've moved on somewhat from that fabled shoe. We've seen our marathon world record shattered. Wearing a new version of the ALPHAFLY. I've forked out a lot of money to bring you this review today. Is the ALPHAFLY 3 worth picking up? There's a new colorway of this dropping in March. Is the hype real? Let's find out. Thanks for tuning in, people. It's always appreciated. Do help the channel to continue to grow by hitting that subscribe button, but also giving this video a thumbs up like.
Dankeschön.
This is a pair that I've picked up with my own Earth credits. I've not been sent this shoe by Nike for review. We have a slightly weight relieved version and design this time round. A few subtle changes to help enhance the ride. Lower weight, new upper, and a hollowed out midsole. There's actually quite a lot of midsole material that's been removed here. My pair of the ALPHAFLY 3 are actually a UK 11.5. I'll fill you in on that in a moment. These are weighing 270 grams or about 9.6 ounces. So for my V1, which was an 11, I think it's about 2 grams lighter than that shoe, and it's a good 7 grams lighter than the UK 11 of the ALPHAFLY 2. So even though we're a half size up, we're still lighter than the V1 and the V2, which is no surprise really. There's a lot less foam in this shoe. Nike are quoting that the heel to toe drop on this one is an 8. Not entirely sure where they're getting that from. That's certainly not what we've got here. I've got about 46 millimeters here in the heel and about 40 millimeters in the forefoot. Now typically for a UK 11 I'm getting about 4 to 5 millimeters over the sample size, so we're almost there, but I still think there's something odd going on here in terms of the way that the inner section of the midsole is crafted. I've always thought that about the ALPHAFLY, and I still think this is a lower drop. I reckon there's about a 5 mil drop, something like that. These always come in taller than any of the other super shoes, and I'm using the same method to measure them as well, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. Who knows? We got about the same width in the heel here of the ALPHAFLY 3. Is about 10 centimeters, and up front it's a touch wider. I've got 12 centimeters here, so you got a 0.2 of a centimeter or something extra width if you really need it. The super soft Zoom X foam here is a little bit different to what we've seen in the last version of the shoe. It does feel a little bit softer to me. I've got a short A durometer softness reading of 22, 63 for the forefoot rubber, and then about 70 for the rear heel rubber. So it's a little bit tougher in the heel, and that's a really good thing. At 285 notes, this is one of the most expensive super shoes out there. Though oddly, we've seen new versions of the ALPHAFLY 2 release only a few weeks ago. Madness if you ask me, and they're asking the same amount of cash for this one as well. A new colorway of a model that was first released a couple of years ago, and they're trying to sell it at the same price as this. Just seems bizarre. I got about 18.5 miles into this pair. I'm going to let you know my thoughts and opinions right now. I have to say, first run I did in these was 2 hours and 35 seconds for obvious reasons. RIP Kipton. Gone too soon. Upper first. I reckon this version of the ALPHAFLY is a little bit easier to get into. Not a lot, but a little bit. Though in fairness, a stunt person with many years of experience from escaping from, chain wrapped boxes in a container of water, would have had difficulty in the ALPHAFLY 2. The mesh is super flexible here and super thin in the ALPHAFLY 3. And you got that classic slightly stretchy tongue section through the middle. This top section of the heel counter is very padded, it's very flexible, but it's still a bit of a battle. I think people doing a triathlon, for example, would probably want to steer clear of this shoe. The classic perforated laces make a comeback, which almost sort of ratchet through the eye loops here. Eye loops, lace loops, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's pretty easy to lock down in terms of that sort of tactile perspective. Those loops pull the shoes upper on top of the foot and create a pretty decent lockdown, though I'd suggest the majority of the actual grip around your foot is just from the upper itself. Now, one major thing I would suggest straight off the bat about the length of this shoe, it's a little bit weird. A lot of people have been saying it's true to size. I don't think it is. you're going to run a marathon in this shoe, I think you're going to need a little extra room. I've gone up a half size and it fits way better than a standard UK 11. I had 2 pairs of these actually and sent the 11s back, and I've kept the half size up. So that would be my advice. It's a marathon shoe at the end of the day. Your foot's going to start to swell a little bit as you get towards the end of that marathon. And after my initial 15-mile effort in these, I feel vindicated by that decision because it still felt really comfortable latter stages of that run. In fact, that's what I did for the Vaporfly Next Percent 2 as well. Always felt a little bit better in a half size up. Super breathable, and I have to say it looks superb. In hand it's even better actually. Looks like some sort of weird ancient running tech. Maybe something like Patrick Stewart era Star Trek. Almost like a Millennium Falcon or something. That's Star Trek, right? Heel similar to the last version in terms of a padding perspective, and you do have a proper heel counter back here as well. Something you don't see in a lot of super shoes these days. So at least the laces are doing a little bit more this time around. I like the reinforcement around the front toe box area, and overall I think it's probably one of the better uppers we've had on an Alphafly. They've always been tough to get into, but it's certainly weight relieved this time round. I'm going to give it a 2.8 out of 3 for the upper after my initial runs. Though this isn't where the major weight saving is. Midsole, midsole, midsole now. Now, midsole wise, I found this shoe quite unpredictable after my initial runs. There's a lot less material underfoot to actually stabilize your landing, whereas the last version of the shoe felt a little bit too cautious, I suppose. The first version was just a lot more aggressive. This is somewhere in the middle of the two, though to get that lower weight, Nike have basically just hollowed out loads of sections of this midsole. Some people are going to love that, other people not so much. I think they've tried to make the shoe a little bit more stable by widening the mid to forefoot, and it kind of felt like I'd run in 3 different shoes in that initial run. Initially the pods were very, very prominent, quite aggressive, but as the run started to progress, the shoe behaved very differently depending on the camber and the cadence as well. Just find it very unpredictable through the midfoot. There's just so little foam here behind where the rubber section is, and of course back here we've almost got like that Nova Blast effect where loads of the foam's hollowed out directly under the heel. Does make the shoe feel even more squashy and compressive. There was a point where I had awful squeaking coming from this shoe actually. Fortunately I was running around a trading estate at the time. One of the garages was open and they did squirt a little bit of WD-40 in there for me, and that seemed to solve the issue. I'm not joking, by the way. Mainly around where the AirPods are. They do seem to be intact. I haven't like burst one or anything. I have to say, round about mile 12, I did get a little bit of arch rubbing. It wasn't a showstopper, but I can tell you now that the Alphafly 3 does not remove that problem. If you've had that before in the Alphafly, then you'll probably get it again. All they've done is exactly what I did with my pair of the Alphafly 2 and put a slightly wider insole within the shoe to stop it happening. It's just got like an arch wing to it. That's all it is. It's the same type of profile. So if it was a problem before, it'll be a problem again. Again, it's a shoe you need some break in. You need to get used to it. You want to let the shoe stabilize a little bit. So if you're going to use it for your marathon, get out there, do a couple of good long runs in it and see how you get on. Very soft now in the heel, much softer in fact than the last version. And I think you can feel the pods a little bit more now because there's basically less foam around them. They're a little bit more prevalent as you push off. For me, it very much makes this shoe a marathon option only, maybe half marathon too, but I don't see any point in trying to run a 5k or a 10k in this one. It's just too much foam here really for that. And I think it's less of an option now for the heavier built runners amongst us too. Even a half size up, I'm amazed I've only got like 7 grams less than the Alphafly 2. It's a bit of a disappointment there considering that we've got way less foam here. Again, in the higher sizes, it's another shoe where we don't quite have the benefits in terms of material scaling. Sometimes the bigger the shoe, it just always seems to creep up and up. And for those lighter, taller runners, perhaps not the best. People have talked about the AirPods here. Are they located in a slightly different place? Yes, I think they're slightly closer towards the midfoot, but it's not by much really. People are making out some big change or anything. I don't really feel it's that different. Again, I think it's Nike trying to make a shoe that's going to appeal to more people, so they sell more of them. That kind of makes sense. That's what they do. Performance wise, mile after mile there, around about 7 minutes 45 seconds. I'd had a grueling 3 days of trying to look after my small lad. It kind of wore me out, and 7:45 was, you know, very achievable across that distance. I wasn't really aiming for distance there, I was just going to get to that 2 hours 35, and that was that. Good training run though, keeping things in the sort of easy heart rate zone, and this shoe does still absolutely lower that perceived effort. It is undeniable. Did throw in some faster intervals on later sessions, some 200, 400 and 1k reps, along with some miles at half marathon pace as well. As per Tim Gross's review, I can confirm this is not the sort of shoe I'd use for a 5 or 10k. Maybe if you're going to do some longer training runs with some faster sections in there, probably a good option. After those initial runs, you can see I've got some significant creasing here of the midsole material. That is nothing new, that happens with Zoom X. In fact, when you get them out of the box, that's what they look like. So don't be upset, don't be absolutely astonished by that, it's just how it is. There's parts of the exposed midsole that really do look like sort of like an elephant's foot or skin or something. There's a huge amount of debris also got caught up in this sort of hollowed out section here. It's really hard to get rid of. You need some pipe cleaners or something. Just letting the shoe dry out a little bit and shaking it out. There was loads of grime and nastiness coming out of these holes here. Maybe you could use your hoover and try and get to some of the crevices. Definitely use this on road or pavement only. I wouldn't suggest using it on anything else. A whole bunch of issues there really. Arch problem, the squeaking, the fact that the shoe really changed over the miles. If you're going to run a marathon with it, you're almost taking like 3 pairs of shoes with you, depending on what you're going to get, and it really does respond differently at different paces. And I do wonder just how long the midsole's going to hold up. This feels slightly different to the material we had in the ALPHAFLY 2. Does feel a little bit softer, but that might not be for everybody. It just still feels like an odd combination, and it's not going to suit everyone. I'm going to give it a 2.6 out of 3 for the midsole so far. There's just too many issues to give it any more at this point. Outsole wise, I feel it's one of the better ALPHAFLYs yet for grip. I think they have done something at least to improve the durability of the shoe as well. The rubber here is tougher and more plentiful in the heel. I think that's going to improve the longevity of this pair, and the segments just stretch that bit further back as well. So well done Nike for that at least. That was a real bone of contention in the last 2 versions. Also, I do feel the shoe is a little bit quieter. I think that's because we've got that Zoom X underneath the pods here, and it didn't feel quite the sort of slappy, noisy experience as in the last 2 versions. I will say here, there's not a huge amount of that Zoom X though. It's not as if it's going to provide major protection to those pods. They do burst. Hopefully that won't happen to you, but there really isn't that much here in terms of material to stop like a thorn or a rock or a nail getting through and puncturing them. The rubber is thin here, there isn't an awful lot of it. Nike haven't been overly kind of generous, and you know, it's a race shoe at the end of the day. You don't want a slab of rubber. But I do feel the grip and cornering was better in the ALPHAFLY 3 than previous versions. I can't help but look at these orange areas here and think they look like the Pan Am logo. Do you see what I mean? I do have some discoloration of the midsole material here, and I will state the midsole does not like getting wet, so if you're running in a very wet climate, maybe grab another shoe. It takes a while to dry out and it does start looking really odd. So outsole decent over the initial runs. I'm a little bit worried about long-term durability. I'm going to give the ALPHAFLY 3 a 2.6 out of 3 for the outsole after my initial runs, as there just really isn't that much of it to actually think about here, is there? Value now. It's £285. I think there's better super shoes out there for the money. I think if you're running a marathon and the previous versions have worked well for you, then this probably will. The early signs though of the creasing and misshapen areas of the midsole are a bit of a worry. I wonder how long it'll all hold together. I mean, on paper as well, it's pretty much the same tech as what you've had in the last 2. There's some small changes, but when you're finding pairs of the ALPHAFLY 1 or 2 for sometimes below £100 if you look around, 285 is just bonkers, really. It's absolutely a big gamble if you're new to running and you're looking around for a marathon shoe that's going to work. It's just too unpredictable. I can't really recommend it so far. Again, if you had bad experiences in the last two, just don't even bother. In terms of value, I do need to talk about the quality of the shoe out of the box, which is really shabby and poor. Misplaced excess glue marks here and there. The stitching's quite bad. Certainly in the heel area, there's lots of stitching that's hanging around. You do wonder how long the shoe will last. I'm not sure what glues Nike are using to hold all this together, but it just seems like it's been done on the cheap. I mean, you could look past all that if the shoe performed exceptionally well. It's certainly soft, it's certainly forgiving, but I've experienced much longer and more enjoyable runs in other super shoes that cost way less than this. It's just too unpredictable, really, to give it a really high value score at the moment, and you're not going to get like a traditional running shoe feel here. It takes a while to get used to this type of shoe. I've run hundreds of miles in the previous versions of the ALPHAFLY. I'd suggest at this point, don't believe the hype. £285 is a huge amount of money, and there are other recently released super shoes that are perhaps a little bit more versatile than this one. I'll give it a 2.3 out of 3 for value so far for the Nike ALPHAFLY 3. If I've totaled the scores out correctly, that gives us 10.3 out of 12 for the ALPHAFLY 3 after my initial runs. Very quick musical interlude for you. It's the sad anniversary of the passing of Bon Scott from AC/DC. One of my favourite tracks from AC/DC is from their Power Age album, which is called Down Payment Blues. This has got everything you need to know about AC/DC in one song. Fantastic vocal delivery, and I love the lyrics as well. How he goes from having like a car that you can't afford to put petrol in to getting bigger and being a big star and having a boat that you can't afford to put any petrol in either. The guitar sounds on this track are fantastic, some of the best you'll find around. Raw, and I believe they used to use very short cables to achieve some of those really, really rich sounds. R.I.P. Bon Scott, absolute legend. Go and check that one out, Down Payment Blues by AC/DC. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hope you enjoyed the review today. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you